Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on mindfulness strategies for stressful moments. The session is brought to you by the NYU Alumni Clubs of St. Louis and Chicago. My name is Avanti Kavi, and I'm the president-elect of the St. Louis chapter and a graduate of the College of Arts and Science. With us today, we also have Sora Chung, the founder of the St. Louis Alumni Club and a graduate of Wagner in 2007, Betty Kagan, our communications leader and a Stern grad of 1984, and Jessica Kiesler, our events leader, Steinhardt grad of 2005, and the host of today's special session. Additionally, we have alumni leaders from the Chicago chapter, including Margot McReynolds, a Steinhardt grad from 2007, and I believe also Jody Blanco, a SPS grad from 1985, and Washington Square College grad from 1986, and Chantal Kazay, a Steinhardt grad from 2005. Thank you all for joining us today in this very special program. Before we get started, I think we still have a few more participants joining in, but I just want to set a few housekeeping rules. So first, please be aware that we have the following features enabled. The chat will be active throughout the session, so please feel free to connect with each other and us throughout the session. And regarding viewing the slides that we'll have up, we recommend that you select the side-by-side option under the View Options button at the center top of your screen. If you have any technical difficulties or issues, please feel free to message one of us in a private chat. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jessica for the main presentation.
Hello, everyone. I am so happy that we have this time together. And a little bit about me. I'm Jessica Kiesler. As Avanti said, I'm a Steinhardt grad. And my background, I've got about 20 years in the field of conflict resolution, mediation, and psychotherapy. I've had a variety of clinical roles, and most recently back here in St. Louis, I have had my own private practice, and I also do trainings through my company, The Visible Self. So I'm going to try to synthesize for you a few concepts that are more kind of classical psychotherapy theory and put them in a framework that uses some of the skills of mindfulness to help us in more stressful moments or moments where we're feeling really torn or in a lot of conflict. So we'll start with a quick settling in exercise to kind of just get present to what we're going to talk about. And then we'll talk about a really common obstacle that we're facing, whether or not we recognize it, in moments of conflict and stress. And then we'll present an adapted mindfulness tool that helps you contain the stress response so that you can see options a little bit more clearly. And then we'll finish up with a bit more of an extended mindfulness exercise, and then hopefully we'll also have time for a Q&A at the end. So hopefully everybody's all settled in. And if you're in a quiet space where you can do it, I recommend closing your eyes. And so if you would join me, I'm going to close my eyes as well. And let's just really quickly do some things to settle into this moment right now. So bring attention to your breathing and just notice the things that you can feel in your body as you breathe in and as you exhale. And just try to let yourself slow down right now and remember your body a little bit more. Continue with attention to your breathing and just notice the things that we sometimes don't at all notice when we're busy throughout our day. Feel the air coming in your nostrils. Feel your stomach rise as you take a deep breath. Feel the shoulders dropping as you exhale. And just try to open up to a little bit broader, more three-dimensional experience right now. Our body is a good anchor to get more settled into a broader mindful experience of a moment. And so just to kind of give you a preview of some of the things we're going to be talking about, I would ask while we're trying to be settled more into our bodies right now, just be curious and see if you feel any, emotions or, what are the feelings that you could name that you feel in your body right now. And physical sensations are certainly valid. You might be feeling kind of maybe relaxed, happy that it's Friday, maybe the workday is over and kind of, relief that that's over, or maybe you're feeling some fatigue, or maybe you're feeling, still a little bit distracted, that there's some other things that need to be done, and that's fine. We're just being curious now, but just give words, if you can, to just a couple feelings that you might find. And then when you're ready, we're going to slowly open our eyes and dive into a little bit of content here. So let's define the term maybe of mindfulness. It's a popular word these days, and I think there's not one right definition for sure, but I think that mindfulness is at least sort of what many of us are wanting instead of the reactive state that we might spend a lot of time in throughout our day. And so I'd be really curious to hear what you all think when you hear the word mindfulness. What does mindfulness mean to you? So if you're comfortable, if you want to kind of pop your thoughts into the chat, and then Margot or Avanti, if you want to maybe just kind of verbalize some of the themes that you're seeing, so we can kind of hear what we're all thinking.
We have some people saying being present, awareness.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll share a definition that I kind of use, I think, and that will be a good start to what we're going to talk about. Mindfulness is essentially using our ability to collect and direct our attention so that we can see ourselves and maybe other people and certainly the moment more fully and more compassionately. And I like to think of mindfulness as kind of dropping into a more three-dimensional view of things, because stress can sometimes push us out of the three-dimensional view and sort of into a one or two-dimensional view of what's going on. And that's what we're going to kind of be talking about as we move forward here. So this is a quote by John Steinbeck that I think is a good jumping off point. He says, or he wrote, I think, all war is a symptom of man's failure as a thinking animal. And we're not going to be talking about war, certainly in this hour, but I think the sentiment, the essence of what he's saying applies to all levels, all intensities of conflict, all manner of conflict. We often, when we're feeling overwhelmed, if we're feeling a lot of pressure in a moment, a lot of times the intensity of the stress, the intensity of the pressure or the danger even that we're feeling is not objective. It's not accurate. It's not rational. And so, part of our task in getting more mindful, ideally, if we're facing a stressful moment, is that we can integrate a more rational, objective perspective into how we're processing things. So let's look at this scenario to kind of give us a reference point to use as we talk through the tools that we're going to be discussing. So imagine you have plans to do a socially distanced walk with a dear friend after work, But just now, a colleague has sent you an email asking for your help on a project or a report that has to go out tonight. And this request, saying yes to this request, means that you're going to have to cancel your plans. What do you do? And before you maybe try to come up with that answer, what I would ask is that you think kind of just to yourself, what are the feelings that come up when you imagine yourself in this situation? Just try to name them. It's frustrating maybe, or it's a little bit stressful, scary, maybe, worrisome. But just try to give 1 or 2 words to describe your reaction to being in this position. And an important context to any situation, but a stressful situation like the one we just talked about, is that our experience of that moment is not just one thing. Our experience is 3-dimensional. The human experience is 3-dimensional. We can be most aware and conscious of our thoughts, but that's never the whole story. We are a human system, I like to say, of our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. And even more importantly is the fact that this human system is very fluid. It's the metaphor of thinking about how our thoughts and feelings and actions kind of interact with each other. There is definitely a fluidity to it. And our experience of reality then can be quite fluid if we're seeing it, looking at it from afar maybe. We've all had the experience, I think, of, not being in a good mood or not feeling well. And so that impacted what we did or what we felt like doing. And I think a lot of us try to use our ability to think and, think positively or think hopefully compassionately or affirming. We use those kinds of thoughts to try to help ourselves feel better. And certainly that can work. But an important part of this system and the fluidity of it is that under stress, there is actually a true hierarchy, and our emotional experience, whether or not we're conscious of it, whether or not we consciously recognize that we're stressed. If the physical body has cortisol and adrenaline pumping through the veins because in some unconscious way we perceive threat, that state change, that emotional change is going to change what we think and how we think. And when I first learned this, it was a pretty kind of revolutionary idea, but it's absolutely true that when we're really stressed, if you think about when you've been maybe in an argument or a tough spot with someone really close to you, I think most of us can resonate with a moment where, someone that we normally feel a lot of trust in and very comfortable with, we can, when we're, having an argument or something, we can feel very suspicious and we can think things that are pretty suspicious and negative about them, that in a moment where we weren't that stressed, those thoughts would never ever occur to us. And imagined scenarios maybe would never enter our mind. And so this is an important context for us to think about when we're trying to address address our needs when we're facing a stressful situation, because, knowing this can't change in the moment the fact that feelings will make our knowledge of all of this go away. So we're going to talk about a more effective way of sort of getting a hold of this fluidity in stressful moments. And so specifically when we're in a moment of conflict, like the one that we talked about, where we're being kind of pulled in two different directions, it's a pretty safe assumption that there are going to be layers of emotion that are triggered, and not all of them are going to be conscious. And this goes back all the way to Freud. The least of his contributions to the field of psychology was the idea that the unconscious part of our mind really is a thing. And he used the metaphor of an iceberg as a way of sort of visualizing all that's going on with our mind, where the iceberg, the portion of the iceberg that was above the waterline, you could see, that's maybe what is in our conscious mind. But most icebergs have a whole large portion, a much larger portion of their mass below the water. And that's still, I think that whatever we think of, Freud's ideas today, they've certainly been updated, but that visual of how much of our experience can actually be unconscious is still definitely relevant for moments that we're facing stress, for sure. And so, the big takeaway from that is that we do have stress oftentimes in difficult moments that we don't recognize unless we go kind of looking for it, or we do something to make it more conscious. And that unconscious stress really can start to create a virtual reality that we're experiencing rather than an actual reality. And this is something that I've seen over and over again. And I bring it up as a point of compassion, honestly, because that's the most effective response we can have when we're in a tough spot. In the 20 years that I've had working with people, and hearing hundreds of stories about conflict of some sort, either internal or external, I am fully convinced that much of the time that we feel, certainly at least here in the first world, much of our experience of stress in moments is amplified by stress physiology. And the objective reality of options that are available is often much, much less dire than we feel it is in the moment. And a big part of the way that happens is that we are pushed into fear-based thinking when we face a moment where stress is triggered. And this fear-based thinking really it's best to make that fear-based perspective the primary focus if we can, and the primary thing that we want to address. And I underline there fear-based thinking, because there is a big difference between feeling our fear and thinking our fear. And I see a lot of people these days, me included, we're very practiced sort of in fearful thoughts. And those look more like, well, what if this happens? And oh no, what are they going to think about this? And what if this? And what if that? And all of that thinking of our fear without really feeling it can actually even amplify it and amplify our stress. So we're going to talk about a way to try to address and be responsive to that. And so just to carry our metaphor a little bit further, when we think about what's happening when we're in a difficult situation, the unconscious stress, if we assume that it's there, oftentimes it's constricting our view into not a three-dimensional view of all the options, but more of a two-dimensional view. And it's sort of a virtual reality that we can slip into. And it's two-dimensional in the sense that the decisions that we face, it can feel like it's really high stakes. And there's a stress physiology reason to that, because when the body is stressed, again, whether we recognize that we're stressed or not, actually The brain is evolved to hand over the reins of our thinking to a very different part of the brain. Without any stress going on, the prefrontal cortex can very easily see three-dimensional options and can very easily sort of intentionally be mindful of what's going on and the experience. But when you add stress into the picture, the brain in a very elegant way hands over reins to a much more primitive part of the brain, which is, when we're really stressed, then it's essentially the brain stem. And that's the fight flight part of the brain. It's not real into nuance. And so the way we're seeing our options, if we're triggered to stress, again, and this happens most often when we're unconsciously stressed, we start to it feels like we've got to find the right answer, or we've got to find a way to not lose something, or we have to figure out the answer that's not at all dangerous or that's safe. And those are high stakes decisions. Those kinds of constricted views of our options really kind of can amplify stress even more. So what we're going to talk about is a way of containing the stress response, because we can't talk ourselves out of it. We can't force ourselves out of it, certainly. The best that we can do is contain it, and that means that we make time and space for a more conscious acknowledgement of the stressful feelings that we might have in a moment, and that actually helps them to settle. And you see an image of a teapot there, because that's a metaphor that we're going to use to try to help you remember some of these steps. And when you think about the fluidity that we talked about in the human system, a teapot is a way that we can make that time and space. If you thought, if you think about kind of really spatially creating the time and creating the space for how you feel. And the ability of a teapot to warm water, we're going to come back to as well. So there's 3 steps to this emotional containment process that we're gonna talk about. And the first one, it seems really simple on the surface. Turning inward and naming our stressful feelings can go a very long way to helping them diminish. And this first step is really about just doing that. Turning inward, naming our feelings, holding them in our attention with compassion. And that can mean just holding our stressful feelings, the idea of them, in our attention without judging them, without trying to get them to be different, for 5 to 7 seconds. And so to apply this to the example that we talked about, this can look like, just quietly saying to yourself, okay, I'm in this really tough position. I have to make a decision where someone's probably going to get disappointed. And my suggestion for this step is that you try on some feelings of stress, because a lot of times we're a little bit numb to what we're feeling. We don't feel anything that we can identify. So if you say something like, am I angry about this? I'm angry. Then it might connect, and you might think, yes, I'm angry that I'm in this position. I'm angry that I'm surprised, first of all, maybe with a request that I wasn't expecting. And I'm frustrated that I'm in a position where I might have to disappoint someone. And maybe I'm sad that I'm going to have to disappoint someone, or that I might have to change a plan that I was really looking forward to. And I'm afraid, I'm afraid that maybe my friend is going to, be really upset with me if I cancel, or I'm also afraid that my colleague is going to be angry with me or resent me if I say no to them. And am I feeling guilty? Yeah, it seems like I'm going to feel guilt in making whatever decision I have to make, because likely someone might have to be disappointed. But making that time, making that space to name how you're feeling it and give it warmth, that pretty reliably makes the intensity of those stressful feelings diminish. And so our second step then, if you've done that first step, you've got a little bit more cognitive space usually to make some assessments about, whether you've kind of slipped into a fear-based reality rather than actual reality. And so in the second step, we check out these 3 dimensions of either actual reality or feared reality. And the time dimension is kind of thinking, is my attention on what, the opportunity, the choices that I have in front of me right now? Or am I maybe really far out ahead into the future? Am I kind of thinking, well, is this going to ruin my relationship with my friend or my colleague for like an enduring amount of time? The place dimension is about, is my attention tied to my experience, or has it spilled into, the imagined experience of what the other people are going to think of me or what they're going to feel about what decision I make? Because that's not actuality, that's conjecture. And then the tone element is about kind of checking out what is the optimistic or pessimistic or neutral sense of where my attention is. Am I, the way I'm approaching what's in front of me, am I kind of going to a pessimistic place? Am I allowing room for optimism? So time, place, and tone. And then the third step is to come back to the choice that you want to make. And usually after you've done that first and second step, you've got more headspace to look at things a little bit differently, see things in a more of a 3-dimensional way versus the 2-dimensional kind of what's the right choice or what's going to be the wrong choice. I don't want to make the wrong choice. Because most of the tough spots that we probably face, or the difficult conflicts that we face, they're usually a selection of trade-offs. There's trade-offs to everything, and the right or the wrong choice is a pretty constricted view of things. So for this step, when we come back to the example that we started with, here's some of the trade-offs essentially that we're choosing from. If you say yes to your colleague, yes, I'm going to help, then you're deciding to trade momentary guilt of disappointing your friend and maybe sadness that you're not going to be able to do something fun and see them. But the benefit in that trade-off is that you're getting to feel the goodwill and some pride maybe of being generous in your work role. Or the other option is that you say no to your colleague. And so for that choice, you're trading some momentary guilt, probably of disappointing a colleague, and fear possibly about their reaction. But the benefit of that is that you're going to get some needed relaxation and time to connect with your friend. And so those 2 choices are a lot less high stakes than, what's the right decision? What's the wrong decision? And so this last slide is just kind of a review of the metaphor that we can use to try to remember the important elements of what I'm talking about. It's an exercise of self-strength and self-compassion to do these steps that we're talking about. It takes strength to go within and give some attention to your full self and make space and time for what you're feeling. But when you make that space and that time, and you give the vulnerability that might be going on, the stress, some compassion, you're containing, you're containing the experience, you're giving it warmth, and that can help you stay mindful of the real options that you have in a moment. So let's put this into practice a little bit more. So we're going to do a little bit more of an expansive emotional mindfulness practice. So if you want to join me again in closing your eyes and bring attention to your breath, we'll take a little bit more time now to really settle into the body. Really take some nice, deep, nourishing breaths in through your nose and exhale. And feel the changes that happen when you breathe in. Your stomach usually rises a little bit. And as you exhale, your shoulders fall. And one more nourishing breath in through your nose. And then try to extend that exhale. The exhale part of our breath is actually the most relaxing part of it to our physical body. And so let's try to settle into our three-dimensional body experience a bit more with a little bit of a body scan. So let's start with our head and just try to notice what the weight of your head feels like on your neck and your shoulders. And then remember your arms, remember your legs, feel your torso, your hands, your feet. Feel the pressure of your feet on the floor and the pressure of the floor on your feet. And then come back to your face, and we're gonna take a little bit more time now with the face and bring attention to your forehead and notice how your forehead muscles feel right now. And just let them relax. Move attention to your eyes. Let your eyes relax. And move down to your jaw muscles. The jaw is a place that we like to silently hold some stress. So when you bring your attention there, you might notice that there's a fatigue or an ache that you didn't even realize was there. So if you find that, just let yourself let go there a little bit. Give those jaw muscles permission to just relax. Move down to your neck. Be curious about what stress might be there and let the tension just relax away. Move to your shoulders. Notice what your shoulders are doing. They like to sort of pull up towards our ears when we're stressed. So if you find that, maybe let them fall. Move to your upper back. And let any tension or stress that's there, just let that melt away. Then bring attention around to the front of your chest. Imagine setting it right in your chest bone. And take a nice, slow, deep breath in. And slowly exhale. And just see if you can recognize a feeling of relief in your chest after doing that. And then move attention to your stomach and another nice deeper breath in. And slow, relaxing exhale. And notice if your stomach feels just a little bit more relaxed after doing that. And then bring attention to your upper legs. And then notice how your knees feel. And move down to the calf muscles. The calf muscles are also a place that our body likes to really silently hold a lot of stress. So if you find that, let those muscles just let go and relax. And then imagine a nice relaxing wave moving through your entire feet, each of your feet, from your heels through the arches of your feet and then out through your toes. And then when you're ready, take some of your most compassionate attention and move it out ahead of yourself. Give yourself a vantage point where you could look back and just see yourself from the outside for a moment in whatever way you can. Or maybe imagine seeing yourself as that container that we sort of talked about. And as you see yourself compassionately that way, look to see what feelings are within you now. And maybe they're physical feelings like fatigue or maybe relaxation. But maybe there's some emotions there as well. Maybe you are feeling happy that the day might be done, hopefully, in time, some free time. Or maybe there's some stressful feelings there because we just want to make space and time for those. So be curious. You know, there could be some happiness, but another important point is that we can feel more than one thing at a time. So we can feel a little bit happy and a little bit worried or a little bit sad even. We can feel a mixture of things. And stressful feelings are not wrong. We aren't wrong for having stressful feelings. They're just momentary states, essentially. So we're just trying to be curious about what our experience is in this moment right now. And when you're ready, then you can bring that attention back inward and move your attention to more of the cognitive space in your mind. And let's look back over maybe the last couple of hours or so. And let's check in on those 3 dimensions: time, place, and tone. And just be curious again about where our thoughts and our attention might have been over the last couple of hours. So have we been focused on our present moment experience? Or have we maybe been a little bit tied to what's going to happen or what we need to do or what's already happened or, you know, what might have already occurred? And what about the place of our attention? Where has our attention been tied to our own experience or the experience of other people, maybe, that we're imagining what they think or what they want or what they might be feeling? Or maybe our attention's been tied to external things like screens or shows or work. That's just something to recognize, that we've been attached externally versus internally. And then finally, check in on that tone part. And again, we're just being really curious and compassionate about this. It's just good to know if maybe the tone of our thinking has spilled into some pessimism maybe, or some judgment. Or maybe we have been pretty neutral, or we've been feeling pretty optimistic, and that's great. But whenever you're ready and done with that, then let's drop our attention into the chest or the heart area now. And I want you to connect to the resources that you have there. Specifically, the resources of strength and goodness. We all have strength to have gotten to this point in our lives. And we certainly have strength to have gotten to this point in our day even. And we all have goodness within us. We're born with it. It's not impacted by what we do or what we don't do. We always have goodness within us. Sometimes it can feel like we don't have those things in moments. But I would ask if you would consider that that's more of a connection issue or a disconnection issue than the reality. Because we really do always have strength within us. There's always goodness and deservingness within us. And when we get too connected or attached to what's going on outside of us, or too spilled out of the present moment and our own experience, it may feel like we don't have strength and we're not deserving of doing what we want to do. But that's not the reality. We're always whole. And sometimes we need to fill up with things to support ourselves. Sometimes we do need to contribute and give to others. But our fundamental wholeness, it does not change. So just try to feel the truth of that. So when you're ready, we're going to bring attention back to our breath now. Nice deep breath in and out. And you can open your eyes when you're ready. And thank you for doing that. And thank you for your time and attention this evening. And I would be happy to answer questions if anyone has them, if you want to put them in the chat. I'm also happy to answer any questions that you all might have after the presentation. I've given my email there, and I've also put my website there. There's resources and some recorded guided meditations that you can get if you want to join the newsletter. But yeah, Margot or Avanti, or are there any questions coming in?
We don't have a question so far, but Tracy Floyd said that this was extremely helpful, and I also feel the same way. This has been a pleasure to listen to, and was a really nice way to end the week. So thank you so much for this.
Good. I'm glad.
I have a question for you, Jessica. The question is, what is the best way to remember this in our daily lives?
That is the conundrum, isn't it? Well, it takes time, and I think the metaphor, thinking of the metaphor, having a metaphor to reference is helpful. And I'll tell you kind of the way I use the metaphor in my life is that when I've sort of trained or associated myself to notice the cues that I've learned about, my stress response. I'll feel like I'll start to feel my blood pressure when I'm feeling, really amped up or really stressed about something. And, I've kind of trained myself to associate that with awareness that, okay, I need to turn inward. I need to collect myself. And in more kind of acute moments of stress or conflict, maybe with my husband, I truly use this metaphor in the moment, even that, it's taken some practice, but, when I feel myself really getting triggered or flooded, as John Gottman would say. John Gottman has written a lot of really good research. He's done a lot of good research about relationship conflict, and he talks about the stress physiology that I kind of alluded to here. When you learn that your cues that you've been flooded, this metaphor is something I'll literally think to myself, okay, I feel my blood pressure going up. I feel myself wanting to say something really maybe critical or, judgmental or say too much to my husband if he's bothering me. And I'll say to myself, okay, I need to get in my container. Because the way I've learned to think about it is that, when I'm flooded, I'm apt to sort of spill out of my container and say things that I might regret, or, allow energy to kind of spill into scenarios that is just wasting my energy. So I don't know if that helps or not, but. Any other questions?
Yes, actually, we have one more from Bali. I think this person's asking, is the stress response ever a good thing?
It definitely can be when we need to get more alert. And so in the first world, there's certainly moments where a rush of stress helps us kind of get on our toes and heighten our awareness and our senses. And so it definitely can be helpful in that sense. And from an evolutionary standpoint, the stress response was very good for our species because that really elegant, don't have to think about it, getting on our toes response kept our species alive. And the quickness of the flooding response back in the day when we really faced life and death realities a lot more often than we do now, the quickness of our sensing of that and response to it was definitely positive. And it was a big contributor to the survival of our species. So yeah, we don't want to get rid of the stress response because it does serve us, but the life that we lead and the amount of threat that we lead, again, in the first world for many of us is very different than it used to be, 100,000 years ago. So we're working with an old operating system in some moments that's having us feel the discomfort a little bit of a lot of cortisol and adrenaline that the body kind of in its well-intentioned way thinks we need, but we don't need. So I think that's part of the reason that a lot of us are so drawn to things like mindfulness is because we feel that discomfort of flooding a lot during our day, and we consciously know that it's not required, and later on we see that it wasn't objective, but it's really hard to change. And I think mindfulness is sort of a backdoor way of getting ahead of it, and certainly more proactive things like meditation can help us get out ahead of it too, because they are the skills of collecting and directing attention are things that they're kind of like muscles. The more you do, the more you kind of focus your attention in a specific way, as we did with this exercise or with meditation, you get, the muscle gets stronger and it can be more available to you in more moments. So any other questions?
Yes, we do. So we have a question that is asking, how often do you practice meditation and for how long?
Mm-hmm.
And then and I think this question kind of goes with that, if you don't mind me combining the two.
Sure, of course.
And what is the best way to practice mindfulness?
Sure. I try to do a little bit of meditation every day, and I will tell you to answer both questions sort of at once. A way that I have found that's helpful to make it a part of my routine is that I put it together. Actually, this is a little odd, but I have an old, it's not at all mechanized. I have an ancient Nordic track, if you guys know what that is. It was they have a mechanized version now. I think it's more of a elliptical machine that you'll see in a gym, but I have a very old version of that at home here that I will do 20 minutes of guided meditation on the Nordic track. And so that's something I can safely do with my eyes closed. And actually there's good evidence, there's neuroscience. If you all have heard of EMDR, there's not probably a lot of time to get into that, but part of the help of the EMDR intervention in psychotherapy is a symmetrical movement is sort of, it's calming to the nervous system. And so I found that doing combining exercise, doing an exercise that is safe to do with your eyes closed, and being able to do meditation while I'm doing my exercise, that sort of kills two birds with one stone. And that's helped me make it a very consistent part of my routine. But I will say, I think there is just a ramping up period too, that, I think it's fair to say that it takes time, between starting a mindfulness practice, a meditation practice, and feeling the benefit of it. And so I think that's helpful to just keep in mind. And I'm a big advocate of saying that, there are moments when meditation specifically is not a reasonable expectation of yourself. And that's usually if you're really stressed. We can't, especially if you're trying to do meditation on your own, you can be stressed to a point that it's whether or not you recognize that you're stressed. If you're having a really hard time concentrating, that's a sign that you are stressed. And it's sometimes just not reasonable to be trying to meditate if you've got a lot on your mind, and you haven't maybe moved your body. So, give yourself that compassion and flexibility too, that, if you're finding it hard to meditate, then maybe, go for a walk and then come back to it, and try to kind of give yourself a grace period that it might feel like kind of going through the motions at first. And slowly though, you'll start to feel some things, you'll start to feel some traction, and over time you will feel more benefit than you do in the beginning.
Thank you. Actually, we have one other question that maybe is along similar lines, asking how to control the wandering mind and focus. I guess you covered the meditation and moving your body. Is there anything else you'd recommend, or would you highlight those two?
Sorry, Vanti, you went out a little bit. Can you repeat it?
Sorry. Basically, just saying we have another question asking how we can control the wandering mind and focus.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's, yes, I think being patient with yourself, and in the beginning, just maybe accepting that your mind is going to wander, and you think about sort of just letting your mind go where it's going to go, and bring yourself back, and let yourself, kind of focus imperfectly, embracing the imperfection of how your attention is going to behave itself or not. In meditation, there's all different sorts. And I think certainly in the beginning, I recommend that people start with guided meditation. It's very difficult, and I think it's a very advanced form of meditation to try to just, without any kind of recorded guidance, to just try to keep your mind clear. That's really asking a lot in the beginning. So there's a lot of great resources for guided meditations. On my website, I've got some. And I'm also on an app that is wonderful that I would recommend to everyone. It's completely free. It's called Insight Timer. And it's an enormous library of some of the best names and practitioners of mindfulness. They've got all kinds of guided meditations, and they also have they have a timer, a functionality where you can also do more of a non-guided meditation. But I think it's really reasonable to start with guided meditation, and that's a great resource. Anything else?
Thank you, Jessica, for a wonderful presentation. This has been an opportunity to bring together alumni from all over the Midwest. To all you attendees, if you are interested in further club events, do check out our full list on the NYU Alumni page under events and programs. And then coming up next week, the NYU Alumni Club in Chicago is hosting our next alumni networking event on Thursday, October 29th, and I hope to see you there. Thank you all again for joining us. We're wishing you all good health and safety.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much.